we check on how Smith derived the price as we've seen it in the second part, defined by an economist's marginal productivity. We get started with output maximization. We're back to our input-output diagram. We again have our production function. What is new in this model is this restraint of our input factor market, defining maximal amount of input factors we can employ. Maximization here means we just go up this line production function until our restraint will stop us from going any further. This is how we maximize the output for a given input. It's depressingly simple, I know. We now check on the other side, so to say we check on firms on profit maximization. We have a profit function, maximize output price times output f of y, less the cost of the input. We define the input factor price 1, so it doesn't show here. Maximized by choice of y, of the input quantity. We derive the optimality condition, marginal productivity equals the output price, or the reciprocal price respectively, meaning a firm will maximize its profits by adjusting its marginal productivity to the price, and by doing so will actually generate this very price. If we now jump back to our output maximization model, we can simply state, if we defined the price by the marginal productivity in y max, a firm will implement our social optimum. This is basically what Smith did. This is how we came to this price definition. And this procedure is completely unacceptable. The moment we do this output maximization, we play, so to say, the social planner. Nice term economists have chosen for themselves to describe their role. So we are sort of outside of all of this. We plan. We give ideas. How could this look like? How could it work out? We cannot just set a price. We can ask the question, when or on what condition will we see our social optimum in the marketplace? And a price might very well set the corresponding incentives here, as a price defined by an economist's marginal productivity certainly would do. And this price actually guarantees firms their profit maximum, not for outperforming. We excluded this option, coming up with new production technologies or reorganize your firm, but for just choosing the right input quantity. Furthermore, this price, as we've seen in part 2, implements a two-class society. And we still don't have this price in the marketplace or have any idea how it might get there, why this should turn out to be the market price. And actually, we might check if this price is the only condition, possibility, option to set the right incentives in the marketplace. And it is not, of course. Since we assume perfect competition here, or Smith did, we might even think about modeling this perfect competition. We might define zero profits in case of perfect competition. We know from profit maximization that this condition will be met the moment firms adjust their average productivity to the price. So under the assumption of perfect competition, or zero profits respectively, we now understand that a price defined by an economist's average productivity would get our social optimum implemented as well. We might want to compare these two solutions, and we still don't have this price in the marketplace. It's still pure visual thinking. We can certainly not derive a price from a profit maximization model. We will need a model of demand and supply. To get a clearer understanding still of the protectionist character of this basic model of Adam Smith, we in the first place have to state that Adam Smith didn't set up a marketplace. Actually, he defined a so-called representative firm, meaning he defined one firm and one firm only. And one firm is a monopoly. So we'll in the following set up a marketplace and try and find out how the number of firms affects our output optimization problem. We go again in our diagram. We again have the same investment decision of a firm, and now we distribute the input quantity between two firms. And this red line here gives us the additional output in case we raise the number of firms from 1 to 2. And of course, we can keep on playing this game and distribute it between 3, 4, etc. firms. If we maximize this properly, we get the optimality condition number of firms versus infinite. And there are moments in the life of an economist where you say stop. That's completely counterintuitive. Completely, it's crazy. We would define a so-called natural boundary, like actually the only natural boundary I see is one input factor, meaning there can be only as many firms as there are input units. On the other hand, on one input unit doesn't make any production. For any kind of production you need at least two. Production is something of combining things, combining input factors. So a natural boundary might be two input factors and it's still sort of insane, plain insane. Even a single person who takes a hammer to put in a nail into whatever makes at least three input factors and so on. We wouldn't see any firms in this world, to be quite clear, if this had any part of not being insane. The solution, optimality condition, number of firms tends to infinite. We get down to the core misconception of Adam Smith's model. We get this result, optimality condition, number of firms versus infinite, because of the underlying assumption of decreasing marginal productivity. This is the very core of Adam Smith's model / philosophy / ideology. We find this assumption represented in the curvature of our production function. We go back to our input-output diagram. We have here the marginal productivity of the first input factor, and we get here the marginal productivity of the second input factor. And we see that the additional output we get out of this second unit is much smaller than the output of the first unit. And this just keeps going on. So with every additional input unit, the output, the corresponding output, additional, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. This is decreasing marginal productivity. We get maybe a clearer idea. We think of these input factors as humans, workers. So a first worker gets out this productivity. If we add a second worker, we only get this additional productivity. Actually, we've seen this when increasing the number of firms. We had this amount of input and we distributed half of it to another firm and we got this additional output. And that's the exact thing we're doing here. This time we have in mind that these are workers. So if we have two workers in one firm, we get this output. If we distribute these two workers to two firms, we get twice this output, meaning this output. That's the story here. And a third doesn't make it better, but worse. This is the ultimate idea of asocial, of anti-social, of, let me say, of anti-humane. And if this was the case, people shouldn't work together. It's as simple as that. And reality is a completely different one. People who work together create more than isolated. This is why, in the first place, why they work together at all. This is why we have firms where they work more than one people. There are things a single person never ever can achieve, starting with getting children. I came up here with the example of humans. I find it very amazing. Smith actually derived this assumption from his very own observing his workers. You know, being an owner of an estate, he used to ride over his fields watching his workers work. He, the great producer, producing nothing. He produced some delusion here. And he made this observation that the more workers he employed on his fields, the less the additional output. We can think of organizational problems, no question about that. Starting from a certain number of workers working together in one process, you will have so-called organizational costs. There might be more room for cheating or whatsoever. So there might be a certain size of a firm when these effects of working together sort of become critical, not to say turn really into a decreasing marginal productivity. But to take this sort of as our normality, as our, let me say, nature, the nature of production in general, not just when it comes to humans, but for all input factors, this is sort of I'm swallowing, you know. We're not stuck with this assumption. We can think of different production functions. The probably most likely production function is the so-called S-curved production function, meaning first we see increasing rates of return, which from a certain point of organization or from a certain size change into actually decreasing marginal productivity. Every firm with fixed costs will have an S-curve production function. As for an increasing marginal productivity of the whole range of size, whatever size you choose, we will see a sort of natural monopoly.